Akhangshita, right?
Akhangshita.
Akhangshita.
Yeah, Akhangshita.
Beautiful name, Akhangshita. Wow. Hey, so Akhangshita, this is Delhi, and I'm away from the airport. Did you grow up here?
Yes, I did.
And so you've been here, what, 25, 30 years maybe?
No, I'm not that old. I've been here for 15 to 16 years.
Okay,
Yeah.
lovely. So have you ever been to the Yamuna River?
No.
No?
No.
Never been to the river? You never went close by or went to take a boating ride or...
No.
Okay, just look at the river, do puja at the river, bathe in the river?
No.
No?
No.
So what's your thoughts about the river, the Yamuna?
The thing with the Yamuna River is that in Delhi, all the residential areas, they're called Trans-Yamuna. And that's like north, really north.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm staying in south, which is like extreme south.
Okay.
So one is, of course, I don't travel because of the distance. It's just too far.
Yeah. Like how many? Like an hour? When you said too far? 1 hour in the car or 2 hours?
It'll be more than that, because
Really? Wow.
yeah, like everything in Delhi takes you an hour.
Okay.
And Yamuna is like
The Yamuna River is even further.
Yeah, it's even further.
Oh, I see.
So I wouldn't do that. And
interesting. So the Yamuna River it looks big on the map. It looks like it's going to the middle of Delhi on the map.
Yeah, except that the thing is, that particular area, I think on the other side of the Yamuna, it's got a very different development scheme going on. It's not like these areas.
Right. Right.
But it could also be because I haven't been there and I could be having a local bias or something like that. So.
I don't know how many Dilliwalas actually think of themselves living in a city that has a river, through which a river flows. I don't think we think of ourselves as a city with a river.
Tell me, why don't you go to the Yamuna River? How come you? Because in the map you live really close.
Very close. Now nobody knows how to get there as the crow flies, because only the crows are flying. We don't walk there because it is hazardous.
It's hazardous.
It's a health hazard. You see,
so between you and what lies? Because in the map, this between you and it's sort of 10 minutes away. It should be just a simple
there's
car
another
ride.
plush colony between us and degradation. That is Maharani Bagh, but you can't walk. Because sitting here, you get all the mosquitoes anyway, and that's as close as we want to get to the Jamuna. Because all that the Jamuna means to us is mosquitoes. Now, when you drive closer to the Jamuna, you can't actually see the Jamuna because it's not there. Because you are on a bridge and you are driving cheek by jowl with all these very road-raged drivers. So your eyes are on the driver in front of you and possibly also on the one behind you. And though there's no time to sort of while away looking at the river that's not there.
There's this like amazing river going through the heart of Delhi. And it really looks glamorous on the map. It looks even more beautiful from the air. But tell me, why does it most people I've met have never gotten to the river, even though they're born here, grew up here?
When I eat my chocolate. You have never been to the river? So? I've never. She has. No. I have been to the river. I have taken a boat ride on the river.
You have?
I have watched the river bubble.
With the...
toil and trouble.
Really?
Methane gas.
Wow.
It's so filthy that it bubbles. And there are people who dive in to pick up, because there are temples along the river, or a few temples along the river, and so the temples very graciously pollute the river even more. They dump sweets, they dump little bartans, like pots and pans and various other things, and then there's a burial cot. There's a cremation ghat. And so when the bodies go down into the river, they usually have some little piece of jewelry on them. A ring, earrings, nose ring, something. And there are people who do nothing but dive in and collect the little pieces of valuables on those bodies. And there's also coins down there because of the various temples. So people, you'll see them pretty much throughout the day. I've been in the morning, and they'll just dive in and come back out with half a ring that hasn't fully burned, a couple of coins, a brass vessel, and all of this is of course sold in the market.
The original city of Delhi, called Indraprasth, was started on the banks of the river in what is the old fort. The river used to flow along that many thousands of years ago. I think maybe about 2,000 years ago or something like that. And obviously it came up because the river water was clean enough to drink. And after that, I think the next 5 cities of Delhi till the British colonial times were founded on the banks of the river, and they were fairly close. There was a very close relationship between the people living in the city and the river, and people used the river water with little or no treatment for drinking and for their other household purposes. So it was a clean river, and the question of toxicity in the river that you asked about didn't really arise till about, say, the capital shifted to Delhi in 1911. The capital of India shifted to Delhi in 1911. And about that time what happened is there was a seasonal river called the Najafgarh, now it's a drain, called the Najafgarh drain, that used to carry water from a lake in the southwest of Delhi to the river. That became a convenient drain for all the sewage that was being produced from the modern city of Delhi, and that was completely diverted into the Najafgarh drain. Few decades later, when after independence, industrial areas came up along this drain, and that compounded the problem. So actually, it's become just one huge cocktail of sewage, industrial pollution, and all kinds of wastewater. And that used to be a regular stormwater drain carrying clean water from this Najafgarh lake to the river. So that's become one of the biggest sources of pollution for the Yamuna River. So from the time the river meets the Najafgarh drain to the time it exits the city at the Okhla barrage, it is probably one of the most polluted stretches of river water in the world. After the Najafgarh drain, there are many other small drains which empty into the river, carrying a similar mix of industrial and domestic waste. And the situation now is that, I don't have the exact figures, but there's practically no life in this particular stretch of the river. Now, upstream of Delhi, the Yamuna passes through a lot of towns and industrial belts, and it passes through a very heavily farmed part of the country, that is Western UP and Haryana. And it picks up a lot of agricultural runoff, that is fertilizers and pesticides, as well as wastewater, pretty much untreated wastewater from a lot of these industrial areas and these towns, because most of the towns don't have any kind of sewage treatment. So all that also just goes into the river, and periodically we get high pollution level alerts. So the water can't even be taken in for treatment for drinking water by the water treatment plants that have been set up just north of Delhi. So there is a lot of toxicity in the river, but a lot of it is because of the concentration of pollutants from a city like Delhi, which is an enormous urban sprawl. And last count, it had a population of about 18 million, and a lot of that actually just goes straight into the river. Delhi has, I think the sewage treatment figures vary between 30 and 50% for the city. But that is in terms of installed capacity. And the actual efficiency of treatment is probably much, much lower. And I can speak about one sewage treatment plant that's near this colony where I live. Sorry. It's been set up to treat all the sewage that we produce, but it does not actually do anything more than just stir it up into a smelly, frothy broth, and then it's released into a drain, and then that drain eventually flows into the river. So that's the level of kind of sewage treatment that we have in the city, and Delhi has most of the country's sewage treatment plants. So the treatment is poor. So ultimately now what the river is getting is a brew of all the heavy metals that are used by various industrial units, battery reprocessing units, that is lead acid battery reprocessing units, electroplating units, printing units, and other kind of small industries that exist in different parts of the city. And none of them treat wastewater. It all flows completely untreated into the nearest drain and then eventually into the river. That's sort of like, it's become a very toxic place.
So what's the color of the river, since I've not seen it? You know how, like, I think of the Hudson River.
Gray-black. It's gray-black, and it just lives. It's like you're in this cauldron. It's so weird. You're just in this cauldron, and then if you go like to a certain part of the river, then you first see one bridge, cars going across, and then you see the metro that goes across. It is quite, you really feel like you're in this industrial wasteland in the middle of a bustling city. Then, of course, there's the whole Akhangshita temple on the riverbed. So they've taken a big part of the riverbed and made a giant, one of the richest temples, and it looks like Disneyland. It's called the Akhangshita temple. And next to the Akhangshita temple is the Commonwealth Games Village. So they constructed, very expensive real estate right on the floodplain. So this is like what is supposed to absorb the extra water, and now it's all concrete.
I don't think it's very useful to see the Yamuna as a neglected site. I think the Yamuna is what it is today because it's been actively polluted or destroyed or transformed by a long history of urbanization and industrialization. It's been an actively polluted river and not merely what it is because of neglect. And if you simply say that there's a neglected site and people have not looked after it, then you're really robbing it of an entire history which has made the river what it is today. Yamuna was in the newspaper this morning. It's been in the newspaper the last 1 week. The water processing plants in Delhi are not able to clean the water because of too much of ammonia in the Yamuna. And I think the only way the Yamuna actually enters middle-class urban imagination is when they know they get polluted water. And that, I think, is the only way the Yamuna features for the urban middle class, as a river which is not gentrified, which is completely polluted, and you really want nothing to do.
I don't have anything more to say about the Yamuna. It's done. It's done, and I'm done. And it's done with me, and I'm done with it.
Why? I mean, the future of the city depends on the river.
Yeah, I've had too many people tell me that. And we have chugged along 99% of us, as I already told you, even forgetting that we belong to a city that has a river. We don't think of ourselves as a people with a river. So when you come along and say this future of the city lies in this river, we wonder what you're talking about. And I know only too well how all those wonderful cities with great rivers flowing through them have had a much better quality of life. But this is how we are. Yeah. And I tell you, when I think of the Yamuna, when I pass Red Fort and then I look up at my history lesson, which is the Red Fort from where Shah Jahan would have stood and looked down at the river right there at his feet. And of course by now the river has moved moved there, and then it moved there, and then it kind of disappeared. But when I look up at those, what do you call it, the lovely jharokhas from which he would have peered down, that's when I think of the Yamuna, because there you actually see, you don't see the river, but you see that lovely wall, and at the end of it, those windows. And you think, oh my God, this wall was so high only to keep the river down. I mean, how high this beautiful river must have been. So you imagine the river by looking at the wall. So it's brick rather than water.
I think in terms of reviving the river Yamuna and other rivers like it in India, the first step would be probably to move away from the technical paradigm of water management and move the control of these rivers and their management back into the hands of the people who use the water and who live along the river. Because for too long we've had engineers and scientists run and plan our water supplies for us, and for too long we've seen that the rivers have actually not reacted well. Their condition has gone from bad to worse. And I think if people actually manage and own these rivers like they used to do 200, 300 years ago, there is going to be a lot of hope for the rivers of India, maybe the Yamuna in particular, in future.
Well, if I was to be optimistic, I would say the Thames and the Rhine and the other major very polluted rivers in Europe offer the greatest hope for the Yamuna, because they were terribly polluted, and yet they somehow stirred the collective conscience of the country, and they got together and cleaned it up. A huge river cleanup that happened in these countries. But somehow I don't feel that confident about the Yamuna. It may be the way I'm not so confident that corruption can be cleaned in India, for instance. It has gone on despite judicial activism. The Supreme Court got into it. The Ministry of Environment and Forests has tried. Lots and lots of NGOs have put in efforts. But somehow there's this apathy, there's this desire not to see what is going on, to ignore it and hurry past. Maybe it will take the depth of a river to make people actually notice.
Have a Delhi. You couldn't have a surviving major capital for 1,000 years. But now, basically, the river is sort of essential to the city, because where else would all the waste go?
So I fervently hope that the younger generation, students of NGOs, government servants and politicians, are stirred somehow to doing the right thing and saving the river for their generations.
All crew at landing stations, landing in 5 minutes.